of meaning for millions around the world. As Christians mark Christmas here in the Holy Land and across the globe, we open this broadcast wishing peace, safety, happiness, and hope to all those celebrating. Merry Christmas. And on to the news. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz sparked political controversy after saying Israel would never leave Gaza and would resume settlements in the enclave's north, only to walk back his comments hours later. The comments by Katz come as the Trump administration steps up pressure to move toward phase 2 of the Gaza ceasefire. Israeli security officials see a growing gap between diplomatic expectations and reality on the ground. We get more on this from ILTV's Devo Klein.
Speaking at a settlement event in Beit El, Katz said Israel would eventually re-establish Jewish communities in northern Gaza and that Israel was, quote, here to stay. The remarks were the strongest public endorsement yet by a senior official of reversing the 2005 disengagement. The comments directly contradicted positions stated by Prime Minister Netanyahu and U.S. President Donald Trump, whose Gaza plan explicitly rules out Israeli occupation or settlement of the territory. Hours later, Katz's office declared that the government has no intention of establishing settlements in Gaza and that his remarks were made in a security context only.
אנחנו נמצאים בתוך עזה עמוק ולעולם לא נצא מכל עזה, לא יהיה דבר כזה. אנחנו נמצאים שם כדי להגן, כדי למנוע את מה שקרה. סומכים, אמרנו, על צור ישראל ועל צבא הגנה לישראל, וצה"ל חוצץ ויחצוץ בין אויבים ג'יהאדיסטים מהסוג הזה לבין היישובים שלנו והתושבים. בעזרת השם בבוא העת, גם בצפון עזה נקים גרעיני נחל במקום היישובים שנעקרו, נעשה את זה בדרך נכונה, בעיתוי המתאים. יש כאלה שמפגינים, זה בסדר, אבל אנחנו שרים, אנחנו צריכים באופן מעשי.
The remarks sparked a strong response from the United States. A U.S. official told reporters the comment about Gaza riled the Arab world and harms efforts to advance peace, adding the more Israel provokes, the less the Arab countries want to work with them. The U.S. stressed adherence to the framework for a phased end to the Gaza war and stable security. In Washington, discussions focus on stabilization forces, technocratic Palestinian governance, and a post-Hamas transition. Inside Gaza, however, there is no sign of disarmament, only Hamas reasserting control. Hamas is using the pause to rebuild its regime politically, controlling aid, collecting taxes, appointing officials, and signaling to Gazans and the world that it remains in charge. At the same time, Hamas has tested Israel's red lines with multiple incidents of crossings into IDF-controlled areas. The Israeli Air Force struck each time, clearly signaling that ceasefires does not mean impunity. Israeli officials stress the IDF retains the right to strike any military rehabilitation, and they are preparing for all scenarios, from truce collapse to establishing an alternative security and a civil framework. Progress remains stalled as Hamas refuses to disarm, and no international force will enter under these conditions.
The United States and Iran clashed at the United Nations Security Council over reviving nuclear talks as tensions over Tehran's nuclear and ballistic missile programs continue to sharpen. The diplomatic showdown comes amid increasing Israeli warnings about Iran's rapidly expanding missile capabilities and just ahead of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's upcoming visit to Washington, where confronting the Iranian threat is expected to top talks with President Donald Trump. The debate at the United Nations Security Council focused on conditions for reviving nuclear talks. The Iranians are still rejecting efforts to restrict their nuclear ambitions.
We appreciate any fair and meaningful negotiation, but insisting on zero enrichment policy, it is contrary to our rights as a member of the NPT. And it means that they are not pursuing the fair negotiation. They want to dictate their predetermined intention on Iran. Iran will not bow down to any pressure and intimidation. And we are not going to blackmail to the body in international field. Thank you.
The U.S. fired back, saying nuclear enrichment was not going to happen.
There can be no enrichment inside of Iran, and that remains our principle. I've worked for President Trump in 2 administrations now, and I can tell you, in both administrations, President Trump extended the hand of diplomacy to Iran. But instead of taking that hand of diplomacy, you continue to put your hand in the fire. Step away from the fire, sir. and take President Trump's hand of diplomacy. It's extended to you.
Israeli security officials have repeatedly said that even without a nuclear breakout, Iran's missile production, including long-range, precision-guided systems, poses an immediate strategic threat to Israel and the region. According to Israeli assessments, Tehran is seeking to significantly increase missile output while continuing to arm proxies across the Middle East. The combination of nuclear enrichment, missile development, and Iranian support for armed groups in Lebanon, Gaza, Syria, and Iraq has raised concerns in Jerusalem that diplomacy alone will not be enough, setting the stage for a potential return to military confrontation. Israel has made clear that it will not allow Iran to achieve nuclear weapons capability and has reserved the right to act independently if necessary. Recent statements by Israeli leaders suggest growing doubts that international pressure alone can halt Iran's advancing programs. Indicted former media advisor to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Eli Feldstein, claims the Prime Minister was personally behind the leak of classified intelligence to German newspaper Bild and later lied about it. ILTV's Steve Leibowitz explains more on the issue grabbing headlines in Israel, known in the Israeli media as Qatargate.
Eli Feldstein, speaking in his first media interview since his October 2024 arrest, said it would have been impossible to use classified intelligence without Netanyahu's knowledge and approval. He claimed the material was intended to influence public opinion against a hostage deal with Hamas during a critical stage of negotiations. He alleged that after the leak, he participated in a conference call with Netanyahu during which they agreed to mislead the public about how the Prime Minister had learned of the intelligence. Netanyahu later denied any involvement. According to Feldstein, Netanyahu's chief of staff, Tzachi Braverman, knew of the investigation months before it became public and told him it could be stopped. Feldstein also claimed that even before the Bild affair, Netanyahu directed his team to limit media discussion of his role in failures surrounding Hamas's October 7, 2023 attack. Braverman strongly denied the claims, saying he had no authority over investigations and learned of the case only through media reports. Netanyahu's office also rejected the allegations, insisting the Prime Minister never authorized any illegal leak, and accused Feldstein of trying to shift responsibility as he faces potential life sentence for handling classified intelligence. The wider Qatargate scandal alleges that senior Netanyahu aides acted as paid lobbyists for Qatar while serving in the Prime Minister's office during the war with Hamas, even as Israel fought to liberate hostages. Reports suggest the staffers may have fabricated or manipulated information and worked with a pro-Netanyahu journalist to shape media coverage favorable to Qatar. Opposition leaders say these actions harmed national security, undermined the IDF, and eroded public trust. Former Prime Minister Naftali Bennett called on Netanyahu to resign, describing the affair as the most serious act of treason in Israeli history. Netanyahu denounced the investigation as a witch hunt, and all suspects maintain their innocence. The case continues to fuel debate over accountability, transparency, and security failures at the highest levels of government, with further court actions expected to unfold in the coming months.
And joining us now is a former advisor to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to break down the political, security, and diplomatic pressures converging on Israel's leadership right now. Aviv Bushinsky, former media advisor and chief of staff to Prime Minister Netanyahu. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, Sivan.
Aviv, you worked closely with Prime Minister Netanyahu. How damaging is the Qatargate affair, in your opinion? Does it pose a real national security concern, or is it primarily a political or legal crisis?
Neither of both, to be honest with you. I don't think that it will affect Netanyahu's potential to be re-elected or his campaign, because, again, it portrays him against the others. That everybody's trying to chase Netanyahu and his allies or the people that surrounds Netanyahu. But I think that it portrays a very embarrassing situation in the Prime Minister's office, the way people are working, to whom they are loyal to. You mentioned Eli Feldstein. He was walking there like zombie. Nobody knows who paid his salary. How come he was hired to the Prime Minister's office? He didn't pass the limitation of his clearance, security clearance, and also the things that he said about his colleagues. Among them, he blamed the chief of staff for Netanyahu for tampering of the investigation. And these are things that people might be concerned, troubling, and portrays Netanyahu's nest in a very, very gray way. But I don't think that it will alleviate to any other political ramifications.
Now, between Qatargate, the pardon request, and the draft exemption bill, is the prime minister still firmly in control of his coalition, do you think, or are we seeing signs of political fracture?
I see some signs. You know what? I can even mention his number one envoy and the most trustworthy guy in his inner cabinet, if I can say, whom I know and whom I worked with, Ron Dermer, that he disappeared. And Netanyahu is on the eve of going to Miami to meet the president, and no one prepares the visit. No one knows what's going to be there. We all know that Ron Dermer is a key person in the relationship between Netanyahu and Trump or Trump administration. So this is one thing. And there are other issues. I can also tell you something that I was troubled with when it was published that Israel Einhorn, one of the advisors for Netanyahu, and his name was appeared on Qatargate, he is most wanted for interrogation in Israel. And yet he was allowed to enter the Israeli embassy in Washington and meet our ambassador. These are troubling things. Will it, again, affect Netanyahu? I'm not that sure, but it shows some kind of a deterioration. And I think that we should listen carefully to what was published today, even in Ynet, that Netanyahu thinks that it's high time to go for elections because too many things, too many events are pressuring Netanyahu, from the National Inquiry Committee to the draft law and to what's going on in Netanyahu's, within Netanyahu's advisors. Yes, so it will affect, but I don't think that the Qatargate is something that will be the brick that will cause the wall to collapse.
Aviv Bushinsky, thank you very much.
Thank you.
3 million Israelis are dealing with trauma since October 7th. To help Israelis heal, Hadassah is there, with the largest rehabilitation center in Jerusalem, world-renowned medical centers, and youth villages. It's said, saving a life saves the world. Imagine helping millions. This is Hadassah, a life-changing force in Israel and the world.
Lebanon is claiming Israel's Mossad may be behind the abduction of a former Lebanese military official linked to the long unsolved Ron Arad case. According to reports in Saudi media, Lebanese security services believed retired officer Ahmed Shukal was kidnapped in a covert intelligence operation connected to the 1986 disappearance of Israeli Air Force navigator Ron Arad. A Lebanese legal source told Saudi channel Al Arabiya that Shukal was lured from the Nabi Shit area in the Bekaa Valley to the city of Zaleh, where he was allegedly abducted. Investigators also suspect the group entered Beirut's international airport 2 days before the incident, raising further suspicions of a planned operation. The Saudi newspaper Asharq al-Awsat reported that preliminary findings point to Israel as responsible for the apprehension, describing Shukal as a figure with knowledge or involvement related to Ron Arad, Israel's most painful and enduring missing in action case. Lebanese authorities have not issued an official confirmation, and Israel has so far declined to comment. And a chilling reminder of just how real and how close the threat against Jewish communities remains. British authorities say they have stopped what could have been the deadliest terror attack in the United Kingdom's history, a mass shooting plot explicitly aimed at killing Jews. 3 men have now been convicted in a case investigators say underscores the resurgence of Islamic State-inspired extremism across Europe and the ongoing vulnerability of Jewish communities worldwide.
A court in Manchester has convicted 3 men for plotting an Islamic State-inspired terror attack targeting Jews in Britain, a plan prosecutors say could have killed hundreds. Ammar Hussein, 52, and Bilal Saadawi were found guilty of preparing a mass shooting aimed at Jewish civilians. A third man, Walid Saadawi, was convicted of failing to alert authorities despite knowing about the plot. According to prosecutors, the men were driven by extremist ideology and openly praised previous Islamist attacks. Their plan? Carry out a coordinated gun rampage using automatic weapons, an attack British police say would have surpassed every terror incident in UK history in terms of casualties. The court heard that Walid Saadawi attempted to acquire assault rifles, an automatic pistol, and hundreds of rounds of ammunition. He believed he was dealing with a fellow jihadist. In reality, the weapons supplier was an undercover police officer, a critical factor that stopped the attack before it could be carried out. Investigators said the weapons sought were similar to those used in the 2015 Bataclan massacre in Paris. Prosecutors described the plot as meticulous, deliberate, and motivated by a desire to target Jews simply for being Jewish. Security officials warn this case highlights a growing concern across Europe. While Islamic State no longer controls territory, it continues to radicalize, recruit, and direct attacks online. For Jewish communities in the UK and beyond, the message is clear. The danger is real, and vigilance remains essential.
The IDF says it foiled an attempt today to smuggle 40 handguns into Israel from Jordan using a drone. According to the army, the drone was identified as it crossed the border and was shot down by troops from the Yoav Regional Brigade. Soldiers located the drone and discovered it was carrying 40 pistols. The IDF says the drone and the weapons were transferred to Israeli police for further investigation. The military notes that attempts to smuggle weapons and drugs into Israel using drones have increased over the past year, particularly along Israel's borders. And the state controller Mataniyahu Engelman issued a severe warning over serious security failures around Jerusalem, including what he described as a real risk of an October 7th style attack. ILTV's Steve Leibowitz has more.
In a highly critical report, the state comptroller examined the seam line barrier and security crossings surrounding Jerusalem and found widespread failures in operations, supervision, and command responsibility. According to the audit, only about 61% of the seam line is protected by a physical barrier. In many other areas, there are major openings, and in some stretches, kilometers in length. There is no barrier at all. The comptroller warns these gaps enable uninspected crossings and create a significant risk of terrorist infiltration into the Jerusalem area. The risk is not theoretical. The last infiltration led to a deadly terror attack at the remote junction in September 2025. 2 Palestinian infiltrators opened fire at a bus stop and a city bus during morning rush hour, killing 6 Israeli civilians and wounding dozens more. The attackers were eventually neutralized by an off-duty soldier and armed civilians at the scene. The report also points to systematic failures at security crossings themselves. Engelman finds that Israeli police are operating the crossings without a formal doctrine or permanent command structure, and that information sharing between the IDF and police on infiltration incidents is poor and inconsistent. The comptroller cites infrastructure gaps, manpower shortages, and inadequate inspection equipment and calls for immediate corrective action. His recommendations include transferring crossing authority from the military to civilian control, closing barrier gaps, improving intelligence coordination, and reassessing the entire security route based on today's threat reality. The warning is clear. Without urgent fixes, Jerusalem remains exposed.
For the first time since October 7th, 2023, Bethlehem is once again preparing to mark Christmas Eve with lights, prayers, and processions, returning to Manger Square tonight. ILTV's Mayan Hoffman was on the scene.
I'm standing here in Bethlehem right near the very large and festive Christmas tree, a tree that hasn't stood in Bethlehem for the last 2 years since the October 7th Hamas massacre. Effectively, Christmas had been shut down, and this year it is back. This evening, we're going to be welcoming the Latin Patriarchate into the city for a procession, choir, songs, and dance. The people of Bethlehem, as I'm speaking to them, are saying what they're most hoping for is that the visitors will come back, the economy will rejuvenate, and life will go back to normal. Bethlehem is preparing to celebrate Christmas again tradition. Tonight, the large Christmas tree in Menger Square will be lit. Choirs will sing and worshipers will gather for evening processions at the Church of the Nativity, marking the city's first full Christmas observance in 2 years. The celebrations were canceled in the past 2 seasons amid war, security concerns, and the collapse of tourism, the backbone of the city's economy. Hotels closed, shops shuttered, and Bethlehem became what local leaders described as a ghost city.
The city was unfortunately a ghost city for the past 2 years, but after what we have done, reigniting the spirit of Christmas, we have reignited hope in the city.
At the Church of the Nativity, priests say the return of Christmas is about more than tradition. It's about survival.
We're still actually gathering around this Christmas tree, and it's actually give the people maybe some happiness, joyful, peaceful. I call the Bethlehem my people, I call them the living stones. They are the stones of Bethlehem, because the church itself, it means nothing if people, the living stones, are not praying as to keep the church alive.
Yet beneath the celebrations lies a deeper concern. According to data from the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs, Bethlehem was 86% Christian in 1950. By 2017, Christians made up just 10% of the city. Many have left due to economic hardship, security fears, and unequal treatment under Palestinian Authority rule.
Merry Christmas for all over the world, from the birthplace. Come to Bethlehem, it's very safe, and come celebrate the Christmas here.
And in other news, consumers in Israel are pleased but local vendors are incensed after Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich has signed an order raising the VAT exemption on personal overseas purchases from $75 to $150. Smotrich said the move aimed at lowering prices and boosting competition and is part of a broader effort to tackle Israel's high cost of living. He argued that many markets are dominated by a small number of powerful monopolies, leaving consumers with little real choice. Critics warned that the move will hurt local retailers who say they're being treated unfairly because stores in Israel must charge 18% VAT. They claim to face unfair competition from overseas where no VAT is charged. The finance minister claims cheaper imports will force local suppliers to compete more fairly on price and on service, noting that there is no justification for goods sold abroad at far lower prices to cost significantly more in Israel.
Your dream apartment in the holiest city in the world is just a click away. Am Yisrael Chai, the lifeline for so many chesed operations in Israel, is holding their annual Dream Raffle, where one ticket only can buy you a luxurious apartment in the heart of Jerusalem. Don't win the apartment? No problem! All raffle proceeds from all tickets go directly to one of the incredible organizations that Am Yisrael Chai supports. And for the first time ever, the apartment is fully furnished. Don't miss this incredible opportunity.
Hello. Before we begin discussing today's headlines, a word on this day of meaning for millions around the world. As Christians mark Christmas here in the Holy Land and across the globe, we open this broadcast wishing peace, safety, happiness, and hope to all those celebrating. Merry Christmas. And on to the news. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz sparked political controversy after saying Israel would never leave Gaza and would resume settlements in the enclave's north, only to walk back his comments hours later. The comments by Katz come as the Trump administration steps up pressure to move toward phase 2 of the Gaza ceasefire. Israeli security officials see a growing gap between diplomatic expectations and reality on the ground. We get more on this from ILTV's Devo Klein.
Speaking at a settlement event in Beit El, Katz said Israel would eventually